So you've heard us cover all of the Supreme Court cases that, you guessed it, it's going to be another summer and fall and then a following year of just crazy cases going before SCOTUS. So you should probably know a little bit about some of the justices making these big decisions. And no, I'm not talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson's Crayola sketches. Instead, how about a little something on Alito? Mollie Hemingway, dear friend, and also the editor-in-chief over at The Federalist. Good to have you. Congrats on the new book.
It's great to be here with you.
Well, let's dive right in. Alito is not necessarily as loudly discussed as Clarence Thomas is, kind of on the right social media sphere, at least in kind of the last year. But some of the most to-the-point critiques in some of the court's decisions have come from Alito's pen. And then, of course, the oral arguments speak for themselves. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, that's a big reason why I wrote the book. Everyone knows about Justice Scalia, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. He's the father of originalism. Everyone loves Justice Thomas, rightly so. He's one of the most amazing Americans we've ever known. But nobody knows anything about Justice Alito, even as his own colleagues say he's the most brilliant person on the court, that he's a giant on the court, that he's the one who handles all of the really big, tough opinions. And I just thought this was like, this person needs to be known more about, and conservatives in particular need to understand more about this person who's delivered for them so many of their victories.
And, you know, just to frame this up, this is the guy when you hear 2, 3, 4, 5-day news cycles based on one comment in the Supreme Court, like, why do we have elections that aren't on election day? Those kind of comments come from Samuel Alito on the bench when we're talking oral argument stuff. And this man also isn't afraid to kind of roll up the sleeves and, you know, tussle it out with Elena Kagan or Ketanji Brown Jackson, things like that as well.
Well, I'm not sure anyone really finds it worthwhile to tussle with Ketanji Brown Jackson. You even saw Elena Kagan had kind of had enough recently, writing in one of her opinions that, you know, what Ketanji Brown Jackson was doing was not really the law. But yes, Kagan and Alito are widely considered the best at oral argument. They're able to figure out the type of question that just completely changes the way people are looking at a case, that strips away what's extraneous from what's at the heart of how they think the case should be decided.
Right.
And when Alito says something in oral argument, 9 times out of 10, it ends up in the final decision or dissent as one of the key issues. So he's a natural talent at that.
So this is one of the things that I wanted to kind of dive into. I haven't seen a lot of the other interviews that you've done on this book cover. There's a list of requirements that the average American thinks should go into a judge at any level, you know, much less the Supreme Court. And Alito seems to have some of the greatest respect for knowing the material. That man reads. I mean, I don't even think Lin-Manuel Miranda could do justice in, you know, kind of describing how avidly and aggressively he's dug through every state and Commonwealth constitution, every single court and ancillary document going into the case. Where does this come from? I mean, this kind of a hunger is like once in a generation.
It also relates to his particular jurisprudence. So you look at a Scalia or a Thomas, they're much more likely to decide a case on the philosophy.
Right.
They have the principle and they stick to it. And for Thomas, he knows what the law should be, and he doesn't really care if anyone else is with him on it. He just says, here's where we should be. Justice Alito is much more pragmatic and much more likely to decide the case that's before him based on the facts before him. And it does create some differences from his other constitutionalist colleagues, even on things like free speech. You might remember there was the case of what's called Westboro Baptist Church, not really a church, but they would roll around harassing families.
Believe me, as a Baptist, that whole thing is, yes.
Well, it's infuriating. And the court really wanted to decide it based on this pure principle of free speech. He looked at the facts of the case. He was the lone dissenter and saw that the way that they had understood the case based on the actual factual record was incorrect. They said, you know, you have the right to say whatever you want. Well, they weren't doing that. They were targeting an individual and his family in very specific ways that are a violation of various statutes. He would have ruled more narrowly. He's a free speech enthusiast, but on this case, he would have ruled more narrowly for the matter at hand. This family was being harmed in ways that violated the law.
This is one of the things that's going to be coming up in a number of cases, not just regarding certain defamation lawsuits, of course, being brought up from Colorado up to the Supreme Court, but there is not a 0% chance that we might see this series of redistricting measures and how these referenda are phrased, like Facebook terms and service agreements. And I think that when you look at how Alito parses the actual cases before him, you don't get kind of the ethical, I believe things should be this, but here's what you actually did, here's what you didn't do, and we're going to lay that bare before the United States. It's a lost art.
It is. And Tony, he'd know, you could kind of pick this up in some of the recent cases dealing with algorithms put out by social media companies. Mm-hmm. Much of the court just wanted to treat it like it was as simple and clear as a 200 years ago case of freedom of the press. And he's willing to ask questions like,
grapples.
Are we sure that the algorithmic functions are the same as an editorial function? Should we investigate that more? It doesn't mean he necessarily knows where he's going to land, but he's more willing and eager to handle the complexity of cases rather than just appeal to broad philosophy.
There's something that I've been wanting to pitch to you for a long time, because I know that the Federalist, you guys grapple with major issues as an institution. It's one of the reasons that you guys were awarded the Dow Prize. It's this singular focus on tackling tough issues and looking at them from every angle. Do you think that there are, sometimes when we look at the modern populist movement, there's an emotion-driven kind of the ethical argument? It needs to be here, so maybe we don't wrestle with it, we're just going to go for it. And then the technocratic kind of establishmentarian who spends all of their time in the weeds, and they never actually make an ethical argument. Do you think that Alito might be a good representation of the bridge between the two, that actually recognizes the merits on both sides, is willing to grapple with the hard technical stuff, but also has an ethical guiding light, maybe unlike Elena Kagan?
So this is the other main reason I wanted to write the book. I'm concerned about what you see, particularly on the right, where there are people who say, I really don't care about anything. I just want to stick to my principles and feel very proud about sticking to my principles. And I don't care if it actually results in any improvement for the country. And then you have people who say, all we should care about is winning. Who cares how we get there? We need to be ruthless as our enemies. And with Alito, I think you have this model going forward of how you can be and should be quite principled, but also pragmatic and prudential about applying those principles for maximum success for the republic that you want to help and the people you want to help. Everyone should be thinking of this as a model, whether they're in the legal profession or not.
There's an idea in kind of American society we've lost, that along with our pioneering spirit that we've unfortunately left a lot behind in earlier years, we've also stopped lionizing great American men and holding them to really high standards. And so when I see a book like this, and just for transparency's sake, of the little of it that I've been able to dive into so far, I'm enjoying seeing kind of the academic prowess, the intelligence, the skill, the wisdom, the character. That's excellent. But I think it's also worth reading this because it gives you a sense that we are still, as an American society, creating heroes. And for our kids, for our progeny, that is worth more than just about anything.
Well, again, thank you for seeing that. I remember Daniel Flynn, who's done a lot of biographies, was talking about how the left does a great job of memorializing all the work of their heroes. And the right just doesn't. But you need to know great men so that you can emulate them and so you can learn lessons from them. And it was why Carrie Severino and I wrote that Kavanaugh book. We knew what happened with Justice Thomas. Yep. They tried to tear him down after he was confirmed. We need to write the actual story, the actual history, before other people can, rewrite it and try to take away great accomplishments.
Oh, it's true. Oh, left-wing streets named after versus right-wing streets named after. It's like 10-1. I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we don't. Mollie Hemingway, cannot recommend her and the Federalist enough. Alito, the justice who reshaped the Supreme Court and restored the Constitution. That link is in the description. Do not go without checking it out.